Hey guys, welcome to the definitive ranking of Link's Awakening 2019 edition. Specifically talking about the new version for the Switch, and we might rank the other one later. Although I think, as I imagine you might, it's hard to differentiate some of them.
Yes. It's weird. So if we do it, I want to do it because in my mind, I actually there's so much more about the original just because of when I played it and everything that it means so much more to me than certain ways the remake did. But I don't know if the score would actually be different because these are just some numbers we're throwing at it. But yeah, I'd like to down the line maybe touch on it again.
Yeah, but you never know what happens when you throw it through the system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you get lost in the system. So, well, let's jump right into it. Let's talk about the world of Link's Awakening.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's one of the better worlds in the series. It's different than something like A Link to the Past, which I think I also gave a 5, and it's because of all the exploration you can do and stuff. This is that, but on a smaller scale, where you've got a little bit to do, and then the world kind of opens up a little bit more. So it doesn't have that right away you can see most of the world. You know, you're first stuck in a town, and then you can go to the beach and the forest, and it's more of a incremental thing. But I love the way it does it, because it's not just now go compared to Spirit Tracks, where it's go over here, now go over here, where it's bits and pieces of the world.
Right.
It almost is similar to how you explore a dungeon, where it's okay, I remember I can go up here now, go up here. So just from a pure exploration standpoint, I like it. But then on top of it, just the world itself is, from a story perspective, is so awesome. I think it's always stood out to me, even from a kid. So it stays very strong for me in that regard.
To me, you talk about the overworld itself.
Yeah.
Adventure of Link kind of was the first Zelda game that kind of did that, where it was segmented into pieces, but that was a totally different kind of world. This was I think the first Zelda game of which the trend kind of carried over from the next several games up until Breath of the Wild, I'd say, where it is segmented. You can only do this area, then you have access to this area, then you get access. It's blocked off like that, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing.
No, I think it eventually got kind of stale, but I think the way they do it in this, where it's again, it's incremental in every single portion,
right,
to where it feels natural, it does feel like you have to remember where to go, and you're picking away at the world itself.
Yeah. I love the world in terms of the characters and the personality that it has. I like the forest and the sand, the ocean. It's nice. I love Animal Village. It's just really quirky. There's all these, there's a talking chef bear, and all these characters that come to life that are literally animals, and interacting with them. So the characters that that make up this world are awesome. I give it a 4, just because when we go back to the geography of the overworld, it's I've played Link's Awakening probably more than any game in the series outside of maybe A Link to the Past, and I still I think at this point I might finally have the world memorized a little bit, but I remember getting lost in this world fairly regularly. It doesn't have the overworld, maybe just because it's shaped differently, because you start on the far end on the west or something. Usually there's some central hub in the middle, like Hyrule Castle in A Link to the Past. I mean, there is Canalit Castle in the middle, but it's not really a hub.
No,
it's just a location.
It's still very complicated how the rest of it all fits in.
Right. So I used to have a lot of trouble early on when I first played this several times. I don't know where I am in this world.
Yeah, I used to get a little lost kind of in the middle there, and some of the screens look very similar. But now thinking back on it, it's literally 3 screens because the world's so small. So even then, like I said, the navigation, but also just how comfortable the world feels to me. I love Mabe Village, and you said the characters. I think of this is maybe tied more to the side content, but I think about that trading sequence, and to me still stands out as one of the more memorable sequence, because every character you meet is really fun.
Yep.
And has a very memorable, like, little tiny thing you encounter with them. So I just all of them stand out for like the just couple bits of dialogue you get.
Right.
And that's like the whole game for me, is how much they managed to pack into such a like simple tiny game.
Yeah. I really think the characters, it might be one of the best games with characters. Like just the little things, like the love letter between the goat and Mr. Right.
Yeah. And
he sends a picture of Princess Peach.
Yeah.
It's like that kind of interaction in the world is fun. I think it's one of the best worlds in the series. I think the actual landscape, there are better ones out there.
Yeah, I could get with that. I also just in general the way it'll maybe go with the story a little bit more, but the fact that it's kind of this like dream world, and it's not just quirky, but there's like there's something weird going on too. It like I don't think there's, other than maybe like Majora's Mask, I don't know if there's a Zelda world that feels even close to the way it does in terms of that tone.
Right.
So it's totally unique in that regard, in a good way.
Yeah. And I think it fits in with the art style as well, because these kind of play off each other. You're on this like strange deserted island, not deserted, but like this mysterious island, and I feel the art style, this is something that the 2019 version of the game really stood out, like obviously. I mean, it was like this art style was made for this game.
Yes, well, to me there's a couple ways in like they did that. One was they're reimagining a Game Boy game on the Switch, and it's like naturally just the way that world is set up and the way the game is set up, everything's very small, so they like leaned into everything feeling small by literally making you a small little figure. We were talking about the clay figures in Wind Waker. This is like they literally look like little dioramas.
Yeah, I can imagine like seeing a play world of the entire island. I think there was like something like this at E3, where it's like you're looking down on the ground like on a table, and somebody just has the entire map of Koholint Island, and it's like
yes, yeah, exactly. That's what it feels like, which I think kind of fits for the idea of like the game it's very self-aware that it's not only that it's a video game, but that it's a Zelda game, that it's a Nintendo game. Like you're seeing other Nintendo characters. It's kind of this maybe goes again with the story, but it all works together, I think. But the game knows that what a Mario character is, that what a Goomba is, that like that Link. So Link confuses a character for Zelda, knows that like you're kind of tied in with the character there, and it's kind of this, it's all this like imaginary world that not just Link is in, but like you're playing with this imaginary world too. So it's kind of fourth wall breaky in that aspect, which again I think will tie a lot more into the story. Yeah,
I feel the world, like everything kind of ties in, and sometimes these categories they bleed in to one another. The story, I will say though, the world is all jolly and happy, like from a visual perspective, and some of the characters are quirky, but the story is not. Yeah, it's kind of dark actually.
Yeah, definitely in a lot of ways.
And it progresses as it get like more and stuff is like revealed like as it goes on, especially with South Face Shrine and onward. Like some of the little dialogue, some of the bosses tell you, like the whole world is gonna disappear. You're gonna kill not just us, but all your friends that you've made.
I even from the playing it again now in 2019, just noticing specific things more. As I play through it, as opposed to going through it fast. But like even the second you get there though, they say something like ever since you've appeared, like there's been monsters showing up and all this stuff, and there's sort of this underlying thread there that like that it's all connected, it's all interconnected. It's not just like you're in this world and there's bad guys, but like that the dream world and all that stuff, and like seeing the Mario characters, that's all coming from Link's mind, your imagination, whatever, the game creators. But then there's also like the nightmares are a part of Link too. There's like a duality, which I never really thought of
Okay.
Because they were like Link's presence kind of brings about the activity from the monsters. And one thing that I really noticed this from playing in 2019 was in the final confrontation.
Okay.
When the nightmares are like, let's rumble or whatever, the shadow actually comes out from underneath Link.
Okay.
And out from underneath his body.
It's like his history too, a little bit. Like
yeah.
He's having like PSD from A Link to the Past.
Something like that, yeah.
A lot of the enemies are like, Lammelus we fight, but you fight Aghanim in there. You fight Ganon in there.
Yeah.
They're not in Link's Awakening. Like, they're not character. That's...
Yeah, you're seeing like... he's reliving things, but we're told it's the dream of the windfish. But like, there's definitely some connection there. I don't know what. Like, it's definitely not fully like explained. It's kind of meant. It's philosophical. It's kind of, and it's also just a Game Boy game, so you kind of interpret it how you want. But like, I just think there's some element there. It's a very basic kind of message, but it's about like, there's a part where the owl says to you like, you know, believe in yourself, you know, like something like that. And it's kind of to me a straightforward message of like, you know, don't let your nightmares consume you or something like that. So actually, and I will say I would have actually given this a 5.
Okay.
But that's to me the only way I could describe the gulf in how I feel between playing the original and playing this one.
Okay.
And
like it lost something?
Yeah, it lost. And this is more just to the weird, quirky uniqueness to it. I think our staff member Locke put it best that he said something like it has almost kind of this like after school or like, you know, it's like a weird outsider kind of game.
Okay.
I've seen people compare it to like Twin Peaks, the TV show. It's kind of this weird, you know, sort of thing with a lot of quirks and stuff. To me, the fact that now it's like this new game and they've polished things and they've made everything better almost kind of takes away, like it almost like takes away some of the quirks and like weird things that made it like unique when I was a kid.
Okay.
Now, granted, I'm glad for some of the quality of life changes and stuff like that. But to me, and this is just a personal thing, but to me, nothing's ever going to beat me playing it as a 9-year-old on the old Game Boy, you know, screen in the car. You know what I mean?
You can barely see because the sun is shining down.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a very personal thing, but it's the only way I could think to like describe the gap in how I feel about the two games now that it's kind of settled and been out for a while. Okay. And that I almost like I do and I don't miss some of the imperfections of it. Right. You know? Okay. Like they sanded off the rough edges a little bit and present to you like now this beautiful clay sculpture instead of this weird old fuzzy Game Boy game.
Right. Yeah.
But I love it. I love the story. I love how straightforward it is. It's straightforward and to the point. Not a lot of like crazy lore to hold you back.
Right, yeah. And you know what? It's a game where the story is what you make of it too. Because I think a lot of people can play this game totally ignoring the story. And just going through and like, oh, it's a fun game. You go dungeon to dungeon and still have a good time on it.
We saw it with Jamie when he played Zelda. He
like it
didn't
flew
get into
over his
it
head a little bit. Yeah.
And you just see different interpretations. You know, I've seen like I think one of the most obvious ones people always talk about is like, is Link actually the villain? Because the nightmares are like begging him not to destroy that. You know, there's just all these like, what if Link's the bad guy type, you know, theories and stuff about it. Which, you know,
he has I think he's got the highest body count in the Zelda series. How many things has he killed?
That's true. He destroyed a whole island apparently.
Yeah. Moving on to the pacing and progression, I gave it a 5 actually.
Yeah,
I think and we talk a lot. Like I feel like pacing and progression is like our category that we've invented.
It's special to us and probably only us.
Yeah,
I mean, we just talked about how the story kind of unfolds. I just love you get just these little morsels of like story in between that like they're so simple but so like you can kind of read into it how you want. But then with the gameplay too, it's like you do a little bit of world exploration, do some fun things, meet some fun characters. It's usually always fun between the dungeons, but it's not super long,
Right.
and the world is fun to explore, and then you're getting right back into that dungeon. It's like it's just a great pace the whole time, going
Right.
back and forth between overworld and dungeon.
Yeah, this is, I'd say, the first game in the series that really defined that's a characteristic that became pretty normal in the Zelda series too, where you're not going dungeon to dungeon. It's like dungeon, and then like after Tail Cave, it's like, oh, you got to do the Moblin hideout and get Bow Wow, and then you do Bottle Grotto, and then you got to go to Canela Castle, then Key Cavern. Oh, you don't go to you got to go to the desert before you can go to English Town. It was like there's always something to do. You don't go to Catfish's Mall. You got to save the nostalgic ghosts.
You get these little mini stories between. Yeah.
And nothing. Canela Castle could be a little long. I would say that's the only one, but generally speaking.
But it's like, to me, it's fun. It's like another mini dungeon. I love it. So.
And then along those lines, we'll get to this in the dungeons. They start off with Tail Cave as being incredibly simplistic, really small. Nobody's getting lost, and then by the time you get to Eagle's Tower and the complexity and the actual difficulty of the puzzle solving, just navigating, they do a good job of gradually, I think, increasing that, and the difficulty progression is fantastic. I think it's maybe one of the best.
Yeah, I feel the same way about that as well. And also, with the exploration, I kind of mentioned it with World, just like I can't lift this rock, so I got to come back here, or like, okay, I need a hook shot to get across here. Like they place things really well in the world.
Okay.
That the way the world unfolds to you, like, to me, feels really good as you're, going through the game.
Yeah. Let's talk about the gameplay and combat. This is the first one I think that you and I, we have differing opinions about this one. And I will say that this is when I talk about the gameplay and combat, I specifically am referring to this 2019 version.
Yeah.
Because I've said this before when we did like Oracle seasons, like that 2D style gameplay is some of my favorite gameplay.
Yeah, I actually gave seasons I think a 4 back then in the combat, and I totally agree with you. Like, this is way different. This is where I was saying, like, I feel completely different about certain things, but the score might be the same.
Okay.
Because to me, the gameplay in this ties a little bit back into like the art style and world, where they're trying to make you feel like you're a little diorama box.
Okay.
So like the controls, you move a little bit slower. Everything feels a little bit heavier. But I think back when it came out, we talked about it. Things feel and sound tactile. Like you feel like a little figurine moving, and when there's a bit more physics that are involved. Whereas like in the old game, which I think I prefer, you're jumping and flying around and halfway across the screen and, clipping through stuff or whatever. It doesn't really, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense, but it's just an old game. That's how it is.
Right.
Whereas this, it's like if you bump into something, you feel it,
I think it lost. Like, I used to love the combination of the sword and Rock's Feather in Link's Awakening DX.
Yeah,
just the feeling of that, and like you try doing that in this game and it doesn't work. And maybe that's just one mechanic that's just different.
It's just different, yeah.
And it lost some of like the gameplay fun that I love about the original. But on top of that, I actually think there's a lot of comparisons between this game and A Link Between Worlds, actually. Just the style and the look of it. And some of the things, like, I don't like how the Pegasus boots work in this one.
Okay.
I think it's a little awkward to use. You can't run on a diagonal. You can just run left, right, and it's like you can slowly move your character up. I'm like, it's like weird on a 2D. Like, there are other games I think that have very similar mechanics that I feel just play better. I was not a big fan of the gameplay.
I feel like when this came up and I just saw I gave it a 4, I was like, oh really? I gave it a 4 because I do just like it less, but I think that it works for what they're going for. That in the the tactile sense. But yeah, the feather, I don't jump around with that like I used to, which I think I reflected a little bit more in the items.
Mm-hmm.
I probably would could go 3 with that one, but
yeah,
that's what we're with.
There's a lot of if we filled out these rankings in a month, we might be different on like 5 different things here.
Yeah, this was one of the hardest ones to do yet because of
yeah
my feelings on the original.
Because there's some good stuff about the gameplay too, and especially some of this we'll get into the dungeons later. Like a lot of the puzzles are I think are really good, and I think this had this took a big step forward. This is more I guess the original game, but like when there was only 3 games and Link's Awakening came out. Some of the puzzles are a lot more elaborate than even in A Link to the Past that came before it. I'm thinking in particular of like the Eagle's Tower dungeon itself, and that's like one of the big gameplay elements is the changing world around you.
Yeah, and I didn't want to divorce too much certain things that are like, what do I like about this game, as opposed to, am I grading this game based on the original, like how it compares to the original,
Yeah.
like it's hard. It's definitely hard.
So let's talk about the items and abilities.
Yeah.
And I gave this I would say a lowish score of a 2.
It's okay.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this off screen. I remember a few weeks ago, I think it was. And the big thing I don't like about this, and I think A Link to the Past did some of this as well, where you look at the 8 dungeons and it doesn't have the arsenal of weaponry that some games like A Link to the Past did.
Sure.
Because a lot of the weapons and dungeon items you get they're not weapons. They're just equipment.
Yeah.
So you get the power bracelet in Dungeon 2 in Battleground, and then like later on in Phase Shrine you get the upgraded power bracelet. And it feels like, oh, okay, now I can lift things. And it has very minimal usage though. Like there's only a few things you ever use it for. And it feels like a lost item almost, like you're not. And similarly, I know in Eagle's Tower, you get the mirror shield, which I think has 2 uses in the whole game. So I feel there, and then similarly in Angler's Tunnel, you get the flippers, which is nice. That's a good item, but like it just doesn't have the arsenal of weaponry that I think some other Zelda games of its time had.
I can see that, and I think it stands out a little bit more on this version to me because I never felt that way before ever.
Okay.
And especially back when it was a Game Boy game, because I said it before, but like kind of the MO of this game, apart from being weird and quirky, is the simplicity of everything. It's kind of, it like all the items were meant to work on a Game Boy and be kind of like this jam-packed micro experience, which worked for even that the first item is the ability to jump, which so even though it is a simplistic thing, it's something that hadn't been done in a 2D Zelda game before, or a top-down Zelda game. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Other than Adventure of Link, right? So to me, it was, and everyone still like affected, for the most part, affected the world in an interesting way. So like, of course, like lifting things with the bracelet isn't that exciting. It's done better. The bracelet's done better in like the Oracle games, for example. But the way it affected like now the world, it as a key to the world, was really effective, I thought. So like that one didn't feel as much like a loss. But now it's in this newer game. It kind of sticks out a little bit more to me. And then on top of that, like certain items just don't feel as good. Like the feather doesn't feel as right to me.
And also, I know the boomerang is also another item that's been significantly almost like nerfed in this version. It's still strong, but it's not the most powerful weapon in the Zelda series history like the original boomerang was. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
I don't think it needed to be, yeah.
But there was a sense of that's so overpowered in Link's Awakening for the Game Boy, but it felt so good using it.
And it was kind of an accomplishment to get it, I guess.
Right, yeah. So between that and Rock's Feather, I think some of the items almost took a step back from the original Link's Awakening, in my opinion.
Yeah, so that's where I kind of reflected how I felt a little bit more about the gameplay there. Is while I appreciate what they're trying to do, I just like it a little bit less.
Yeah. Let's talk about the dungeons. You and I both rated this one fairly high. We both gave it a 4.
I was telling you too, this is where, as the series has gone out, I'm like regretting certain rankings.
Oh, okay.
Because I gave A Link to the Past a 4, And now that I think about it, I'm like, it's like some of the best sets of dungeons. And that's why I came to this. I was like, maybe it's just nostalgia, but I love the dungeons in this game.
Okay.
Some of them don't have as crazy gimmicks as later Zelda dungeons, but I just love the design and, the memories I have tied to them. I wanted to go 5 on this one.
Okay.
But could I say these are better than A Link to the Past? I don't know.
You're like putting yourself in a hole with some of these previous rankings almost.
Yeah, I'm gonna disregard this later though. But this was one that was hard to overcome. But these are some of my favorite dungeons in the series.
I would say, we recently on the website did the top 50 dungeons of all time, and several from this game made it. I know Eagle's Tower was pretty high up on our list. It was in the top 20. I actually voted, and I put in the Color Dungeon too. I think it's kind of a standout. And I know we'll get to this in side content a little bit, but I think when you think about it, this is more so maybe for the original Game Boy, but it's not as special now. But it's like the first ever optional dungeon in the Zelda series.
Yeah.
It's also like, it wasn't in the original Game Boy. It's only in the DX version, but like it's like the first almost like DLC dungeon. Not really DLC. You got to buy the whole game, but I mean like this wasn't in the base game if you remember. And they added it later. I like that it's got a remix of the original theme a little bit, the original dungeon theme. It's got its own boss, 2 different mini bosses. It's a fun dungeon. I like it. And I love Eagle's Tower, and I think Turtle Rock is also one of my favorites because it's sort of like it's one of those like compilation dungeons, I think.
Yeah.
Where it's like the best of the whole.
Got all the bosses, all this stuff.
It's like there is like in Legend of Zelda had Death Mountain, and then there was the Great Palace, and A Link to the Past had Ganon's Tower. Turtle Rock is kind of that last dungeon where it's like a greatest hits dungeon because the Windfish is not a dungeon.
Right. You got to fight a boss to get in it.
Yeah.
This one, the Color Dungeon made me think because it's sort of simplistic in that it reminds me of the Legend of Zelda. I think of this game dungeon wise it's almost a sequel to the Legend of Zelda more so than like A Link to the Past. Just in that you're in these static rooms and it's a lot more simplicity, but then with added stuff like new mechanics that come from A Link to the Past and stuff like that. But they do thematically remind me of the Legend of Zelda. But I love they really tightened up like the navigation and like what you do in the like where you have to go in terms of like picking away at the knot of the dungeon. So I love that it's got that same thing I love about like where do I spend these keys, that type of thing from the original game, but like now they've really focused in on that aspect as a puzzle. Another thing I love about the dungeons is that they add in, like the original Legend of Zelda, you're in these kind of chambers, but they're all kind of just different color swaps. They do a couple things to make it feel unique. But in this, they come up with some goofy, what do you call it, themes that are not just like elemental to like make it stand out. So you've got like, a bottle shaped one. It reminds me of the original Legend of Zelda where it's like this map looks like this, but now there's all these pots you got to lift. Or you've got the key cavern, which has a ton of keys, like they're just quirky and weird, which I really love.
Yeah.
I also love the added in element now of the puzzles that you need the stone beak to find stuff. Like it just adds another like, it's almost another key that you need. Like you got the dungeon item you find, which will unlock portions of the dungeon, but the stone beak gives you like knowledge that you need your first time through to like discover the rest of the dungeon. So I love that it's like, okay, I don't know where to go next. And then you might get a hint that you hadn't considered before.
Right.
So I don't know. It's just a cool, another collectible almost to find in the dungeon.
Yeah.
And especially if you're going back 100%ing, it's just another, it's just another cool thing to find that I think is more unique than finding like a stamp or whatever, a joy pendant.
Take that, Twilight Princess and Wind Waker. Anything else?
I'm good for
anything
now.
For Ocarina we got? A Skulltula?
No, those are cool.
Oh,
I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't
Spoilers for
all 5s.
So let's talk about the enemies and the bosses.
So
I thought it's got I like it. it's got a lot of the same enemies from A Legend of Zelda and A Link to the Past. The enemies, I think, are solid. They're great. The bosses they're all good. I think they're all okay. I mean, there's a few, like the anglerfish. I know they reinvented him a little bit in this version to make him a little bit more exciting.
We did a whole video on the bosses, actually, and most of them we said were improved, I think.
Yeah.
They're still so simplistic. None of them are hard, really.
Yeah. I like a lot of the bosses, but some of them, like, was it Facade? I mean, it's not...
but he calls you like a butthead or something like that, so I like it.
And like Genie is like, nya, nya, nya.
Yeah. That's actually why I went so well with them, because they're like mechanically a 3. They're like good, they're fine, but like I just love the character of them and how it it ties into the game so well. And as you go on further, they get more and more impassioned in their plea for you to like stop.
Yeah, they're kind of like characters. They have dialogue and such. They're not just these monsters,
Yeah, and something like Genie is very unique. We've never seen. There's no other Genie boss in the series.
Yeah,
and I also was considering the mini bosses, because there haven't been really a lot of mini bosses before this, but there's a lot in this game. You got the Hynix and the Rolling Bones or
Rolling
whatever.
Bones. Yeah, looks like Slimer in this version, like a pink Slimer.
He's gross.
Yeah.
You got the guy who plays the flute for the bats, and then he's
okay.
Yeah, so I just like
the Grim Creeper.
Yes,
is his name.
Okay.
He's fantastic, and he rides on top of Evil Eagle.
Yeah, so kind of like that's like a story element that carries through.
Yeah.
So I just like that kind of stuff. One I really wanted to mention was the Master Stalfos.
Okay.
Who kind of he follows you around the dungeon, like a reoccurring kind of boss fight there. Just love that little stuff. But yeah, none of them are hard or anything, but
yeah,
they're simple and quirky, which is what the game's MO. So
yeah. So jumping into the side content, and as usual, this is always the category I think that gives me the hardest time.
Yeah.
So part of me, my initial thought was 1. Like,
wow,
because like I'm like, what's the big thing that immediately stuck out to me?
The dungeon, the chamber dungeon.
Yeah, Dampe's dungeon maker, whatever. And we spent numerous videos talking about flaws or how that could have been done better. And I don't think anybody can sit here and say that was done well. Like,
yeah,
some people can give it a pass, but it was just not very fun. But I eventually came back to reality and realized there's a lot of good side content in this. And one, expanding on what they did with DX, there's a lot more seashells spread across the world, a lot more heart pieces spread across the world. And we talked about the color dungeon. It's the first optional full-blown dungeon. There's also the mini games got significantly improved upon, I would say.
All the mini games I think are better.
Well, in particular, the trendy game and the fishing hole.
Yeah.
Are there any other mini games?
Well, there's the raft.
Oh, the raft. Yeah.
It's fun. I think it's fun.
That got better. So like, it does a lot of stuff better. The collectibles are better. We did lose out. We lost out on the photographs. And Dampe's Dungeon Maker is one of the worst things in the Zelda series, I would say.
Yes.
So that averaged out to middle of the road to me.
You put it basically the same as me, but I almost went at it from the opposite way. First, I was thinking about the original and how much I loved it in terms of the side content, because while there's not a bajillion things to do, but in the scope of that game, it's perfect. It reminds me of how we went with A Link to the Past, where there's a couple. This is before they added like the big collectathons, but everything in there works. Sure. Then I thought, okay, sure, they added more seashells, but that doesn't. To me, that more isn't necessarily a good thing.
Right.
But it also wasn't bad. I actually like that there's more. They added some hearts. Okay, that's cool. That's fine and all. Then I thought about the mini games, and I was like, oh, but that's a way better. I love those, And then I considered, oh, but then there's that dungeon mode. And I was like, that's fine. You can disregard it. But then I remembered like, oh, but there's like heart pieces you get in that. And there's seashells
Yeah.
tied to it. And that's what bugged me, you know, that brought it down to, I'm still saying it's good,
Yeah.
you know, because you can still disregard that stuff. Like,
right. Exactly.
But if you want to, you know, I'm not a big 100%er, so it's never really going to matter.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, the core fun is still there. I love after you beat a dungeon, like, oh, let's go see what the trendy game has added. You have a reason to go back there, like, oh, are there some new fish?
Yeah.
You know, if you like the Dungeon Maker, you can go, oh, let's go see the new dungeon.
Nobody likes the Dungeon Maker. Come on. Be realistic here.
But then also, yeah, I don't know if this really affected the score either, but yeah, the photographs, those were cool.
Yeah, and they still had some of, like, you can go with Marin to the beach and it still shows a scene, but there's the mouse was a fun character.
Yeah.
Like, some of those scenes of him, like, he's, like, falling off the bridge, taking a picture of you. And, you know, little things like, he had a good personality, too.
Yeah.
The fisherman catches him and he takes a picture.
Right.
You know, little things like that.
There's still, yeah, some of those scenes you can go to the trendy game and do that scene or whatever, but
yeah, that one's a new one, right?
That's not really what I thought about mostly, though. It was like, okay, they improved all this stuff, but yeah.
Perhaps one of the things I think they most improved, and this is a Zelda game, so the music is always one of the best categories for everything, but the music did get maybe a substantial upgrade. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm torn on it because for me, again, going back to the story, like, part of that experience back in the day was that it was this kind of simplistic Game Boy game, and they're playing this, like, super touching ballad, you know, and, like, thinking about the end of their world and themselves, and, you know, wishing you could be a seagull and fly away. But it's just these really, you know, simple graphics and simple music that kind of highlighted some of that stuff. But then there's other songs that are a bit more forgettable. But for me, the whole package, it does actually work really well.
Yeah.
So it's another one where maybe I'd probably rank the music lower.
Okay.
And all, but I think the whole experience I probably liked better.
Yeah. I like, the songs are the same at the end of the day for the most part.
They did add some things that I think are cool that were, again, kind of reimagining the tone of the original game. Like, one that I really like is when you're talking to the owl, there's almost that toy box melody that plays. And on the Game Boy, it's just the notes of, you know, doon, 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 doon.
Yeah.
But in this, they add, like, this ominous horn underneath that's like, it's the nightmare creeping in almost. It's like, dun, 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 and it's like, whoa, this got really creepy all of a sudden, you know?
Yeah.
And they do that throughout the game a little bit. And they also sometimes use not exactly the same sounds, but old kind of chiptune music mixed in with the new.
Right.
And they mix it with new kind of orchestrated music, or sometimes the toy box sound to make it sound like a toy box. And they do a good job of making it you feel like you are in a tiny toy box world with the music.
Right. Yeah.
And throw in some of the classic Game Boy chiptune and
right. Yeah. I would say, like, I think a lot of people find the sound of the original Game Boy, just because it's a limitation. I'm not necessarily the music, just the sound effects and whatnot, to be a little bit more simplistic, or in some cases, there's some high pitch, like some of the sounds. They're not always the best for the ears, I think. Yeah,
to me, there's nothing in this that compares to the magnetic gloves in Oracle of Seasons.
Right.
But there is, like, in the original, when you go into, like, is it Key Cavern, I think it is, or it's dun, 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 dun. It's like calm down. It's a little much, but
I think the music is just a lot more polished, and as a soundtrack, it is much more pleasant to listen to. This version. That being said, I do think some of the songs I think lost some charm, actually. Yeah, like Tall Tall Heights or the Tall Tall Mountain Range. I love that theme on the Game Boy, and I feel like maybe it's because all the other songs got better that one doesn't stand out as much. But stuff like the Ballad of the Windfish is a great song, but when I listen to it on the Game Boy version, the original, it's better in my mind than it is in reality, I think. and maybe it's because I'm used to, the music, but it just doesn't sound as good on the Game Boy. But I love it in the Symphony of the Goddesses, or like all the various orchestrations of the song. Mm-hmm. I think it's great.
See, that's one that it works for me on the Game Boy, but particularly the beach scene.
Okay.
Because it's like all these sparse little bleeps and bloops,
And you hear the waves.
Yeah, the little Game Boy waves. Yeah, to me, part of the charm of the original is, again, the simplicity and the limitations. But I mean, I still, I probably gave this a better score than I would have given that as a whole. But yeah, that's where scoring things sometimes is weird. So
right. So let's see how Link's Awakening ranks up overall. So the community, we now have a 3-way tie here with Wind Waker, A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening. I think we have to go to not just the 10th, not just the 100th. I think we have to go to the 1,000th decimal points to differentiate between Link's Awakening and A Link to the Past. But it has it right in the middle of the bunch right now.
Wow.
The staff has it kind of in the middle too. Some minor notes, some corrections from last month. There was some Monday detail that I screwed up. So Wind Waker's actually was slightly ahead of A Link to the Past. Some corrections from last year. So staff has Wind Waker as the top game. You and I, we're still in the same boat though.
Yeah.
Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, and then gets a little muddled after that.
Sort of. Not really, actually. Our bottom three are the same. It's just Oracle and Wind Waker where we.
Both of us had a large gap between 1 and 3, and this kind of just slid right into that giant void.
Yeah, so now we're starting to our list is getting pretty filled out here. Where now things are going to be squeezing between stuff as opposed to comfortably sliding into places.
Yeah, so things are starting to take shape. It's starting to fill up. And
these are totally diverse. With the community, maybe we're just seeing most games are just genuinely positively looked upon.
Yeah,
3.9, 4.
I think I said this after Spirit Tracks and I was wrong, but I think I can say it now. We have developed the range here. Mm-hmm. I don't think we might get something just above 4.2, but I think we found the bottom and near the top. Mm-hmm. So almost every game is going to be in the upper 3s from this point forward, or lower 4s.
Yeah.
Whereas I think ours are, because obviously it's just one person's opinion as opposed to
averaging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make what you like about this list, because next month we are covering The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap.
Yes.
I don't know where that's going to fit.
Yeah, when we did our video, we put it last, I think.
Really?
I think so.
It went above Twilight Princess? I mean, below Twilight Princess?
I think we might have. I don't know why we were so harsh on it, thinking back on it.
Oh, man. I didn't know if I thought. Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
We got to throw it through the machine. I think it's going to be in my jumble of the bottom 5 right now.
Yeah.
Because it's not. A lot of my favorite games haven't come up yet, but A Link to the Past, now Link's Awakening, there's still several of my other favorite ones that are still waiting.
Saving some of the heavy hitters.
Or my heavy hitters. I think the community's heavy hitters, maybe, I don't know.
Oh yeah, maybe they've passed us by.
Maybe you guys disagree, but thanks for watching, guys, and go ahead and fill out the poll. The link is in the description for the Minish Cap for next month, and we'll see you guys then.